All right, let's get this done.
All right. Any other questions?
Oh, I have a question.
Okay.
I did follow your instructions everywhere. From what I paid close attention and how you explained it. I paid close attention and followed it all the way to the end. I'm actually just throw different names instead of I'm actually the name that was already on there.
No, you should have used that list of names that I gave you.
I'm sorry, I should have just asked.
Yeah.
This is not too late to fix it, is it?
As long as it's not doodled tonight, I don't think, or and you can just take that Word document and you can just let me find it again. You can just highlight and copy that into your file. Let me pick a place down here. Just
I think assignment 25 was due last night at 11:30. But I had a question. I had that question I was going to ask you before I submitted.
Okay.
That did not make me feel better.
You can just copy that list so you don't have to retype it.
Okay. I'll make that fix and resubmit it to you.
Yeah. I am allowing a little bit of late. I'm usually, if it's a day late on things, I'm not taking off. I'm being a little lenient there. If it's a week late, I'm not going to take it unless you've got a good reason. But I'm not counting off usually if it's something is a day late.
Okay. I'll make the correction. And then resubmit it to you.
All right.
Thank you. And one last question: is that Greek in your shirt?
Do what?
Your shirt, is that Greek?
No. That is Maxwell's equations. If you were taking calculus-based physics, when you get to light, these are the equations that tell how light works. So the top part, it says, and God said, and there's Maxwell's equations, which those are the equations that tell how light works. And at the bottom, it says, and there was light.
That's funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This one's getting a little long in the tooth. I need to get a new one of it. I've had this several years. I once, and this is off topic, I once was doing a sermon filling in for a preacher, and the sermon was on Genesis 1, so I wore this shirt when I did it. All right. Let's see. I need to pop out my chat in case anybody's chats. All right. What we did yesterday is we started looking at actually the Monday night session, and then yesterday's we were looking at files and looking at how we can read from files and then write to files. And one of the last ones we looked at, somebody had asked about, well, can we actually supply the file name and a path? If you just supply the file name and no path, if you're creating or reading a file, it is going to create it, or it's going to look for it in whatever the current directory is. So in my case, that would be this directory, this folder that PyCharm created that has all of my files, my programs. Luckily, we can figure out where that is. We already should know how to do that. Right-click in PyCharm on the file name and then show in Explorer. Or if you're a Mac user, it's show in Finder. And that will show you physically where they are. But if the file, you either want to create it in a different folder or you want to read it from a different folder, you can supply the entire path. If it's a Windows machine, in order to properly get it to put the backslashes in, you've got to do a double backslash or escape the backslashes. On a Linux machine, it's a slash, so that works fine. So if this was running on a Linux machine, this is the first thing we have done this semester that would be different on a Windows machine versus a Mac versus a Linux machine because of the way the file naming structure is on those. If you just want to use it in the current directory so you don't have to put a path there, it's no different on it. But this program as is, even if I had a folder called documents, I don't have a drive letter on a Linux machine, I would have to change that part of it.
Okay, could you please leave automatically Zoom A3 up there while I go type this in?
Again, Derek, these are all up on that share that you can download.
Understood.
Okay, so yeah, they're all up on that shared folder in let's see, that shared folder. Where is it? Here in the Google Drive that I sent you all the link to a while back. So it's already up there.
Where do I go to see all that?
I sent an email out a couple, 3 weeks ago that had the link to it. If you can't find the email, send me another email but I sent an email a couple, 3 weeks ago out to everybody, and it had the link to the Zoom sessions, the video, as well as the link to this one.
That's not in my it's not in my email.
Okay. Well, after class, I can resend it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Where was I? Okay, so there I did it. This one I opened for appending. If you open for append or with an A, that says if the file's already there, you're going to add to the end of it. If you open it for writing, just a W for write, if the file is already there, it wipes it out. And in it, what we did was we looked at or asked the user to enter a name and an age, and then we just wrote it one line at a time. We also had looked then at reading a file, and I had created a couple of files so that we would have them for reading purposes of reading. So we had this text2 file that we were open for reading, and the text2 file just had these 4 lines, and I had to put some commas in there. We had, prior to that, we had looked at just reading the file without the commas. So let me go back a little more. Okay, maybe here where I had the same file, but I didn't have those commas in it. And when we ran it, each line with the split, it split it on spaces. So if we read the file, if we didn't do the split in here in this print, it would just be a line of text. The split it in and made each line a list, and it separated it on spaces. Then we changed that to separate it on a comma space, and that's when I went to this read2 file. And so everywhere there was a comma in the read2 file, a comma space in the read2 file, it said, okay, those are going to be separate items in the list. They're going to be separate items in the list. We went on and I stripped out the new line character at the end and then split it, the white space at the beginning and the end. Here another one was just stripping out, where in this one I split it in, but there was a new line. Let me comment out this one a sec, that this x minus 1 a second, and run it. And you see the new lines there. So what I did in this one, after I split it, I said, okay, take the last element in the list and strip out the white space. And you remember when we did the white space, the strip would remove blank spaces at the beginning or end of the string, as well as the new line character. So when we added that, it got rid of the new line character. So this is just started processing data as we read it. And that gets us, I guess, ready for today. Any questions on any of that? Well, I've got a file that is a comma-separated values file. And in this case, it has headings. And it's got an index, a year, an age, a name, and a movie. And that first row happens to be the headings. The rows beyond it are our rows of data, and each row has the same data in it. And this is a typical CSV or comma separated values format. You can choose, if you want, to do all the processing yourself. So if I wanted to do all the processing myself, I could. First thing you would do is open the file. So give it a file handle or a variable name to identify the file. Open. Nothing different now. The file name. And I needed to quote Oscar underscore age underscore female dot CSV. And close my quotes. And I'm going to open it to read. So I'm going to open that file to read it. And then I can use a for loop. If I just do for line in, and this is nothing that we haven't done in another one, FH. If I just print the line, it prints each line basically as is. Now it's putting a blank line in between because of that new line character. But we could go based on what we've done before in that earlier one. I could take it and I could split it. Sorry.
Okay.
Let's say X is equal to line dot split. And I want to split it on a comma space. And if I do that, then print X. Again, no formatting here. You can see it brought those in. But in this case, there's white space at the end. This one's actually got a tab and then a new line. So if I want to get rid of that at the end, well, I can say that X, and if I want the last element minus 1, X element minus 1 equals X element minus 1 dot strip, and the strip will get rid of that white space. and it's only going to do the last element in the list each time. So when we look now, it has gotten rid of that new line character. So that's really not anything different than before. We could then go in and strip out quotation marks if we needed to get rid of those double quotes. We would need to go, and we know the double quotes would be in the last two fields, so we could actually go in and strip those characters out. Let's do that. And it's the last two, so -1. But with the strip, this time it's not the white spaces I want. I wanted a double quote. And I need to do that with the next to the last as well. With -2. And index out of range. Oh, what? No, -1 and minus. Okay. Well, is anybody seeing my error? That is the right syntax for the strip, to strip out a character.
Oh, I'm making sure I get everything though.
Let's see. Let me.
Are you sure all your rows has the fields that it needs to be stuck on a row like that?
Well, it's still the last two, so.
The one I'm. Oh, sorry, sir. Go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt you. I was gonna say when I automatically what I wrote and pay attention to, it said the error was automatically with the x automatically -1 equals -1.
Yeah, but I do have an index of -1 and 2, so they, even if there's no double quotes in there.
Yeah, but since that's a string and your other variables are integers, would that cause it? Or your other fields are integers?
Well, it's still got them. It shouldn't matter because it's still got them in the single quotes.
Well, wait a minute.
Okay, it's gone through. Okay, it didn't give me that before. It's done all right, except then it's on the last one. So, I think I know.
What's the last line?
The order. The last one no longer has that new line. So if I strip out on, if I move the stripping the quotes out in there for the very last field, I think, let's see. Well, let's do it for both of them. Maybe not. I was thinking that it was because of no new line character. But let's, still an index out of range.
Is it the last line in the text file?
That's what it is on the last line. So let's,
blank line.
There are blank lines there. There are blank lines, and it is not going, if I go ahead and change that and get rid of those blank lines, now it works okay. So that's what it was, is it was the blank lines at the end. So there again, your data, you've got to be careful about your data. And yeah, there were blank lines at the end, so there were no fields. So the index would have been out of range. So what we probably needed to do was check before we did any of those stripping commands. We probably needed to check to make sure there weren't blank lines. So once we got rid of those blank lines, it wouldn't have mattered the order we stripped them out. But that got rid of the quotes. Now that's a long way of doing it, but it works. Where you can run into some issues doing it manually is if you've got data that may not, shall we say, be perfect. And one of those things could be if you have data that has commas inside of a field.
Mr. Perry, not to interrupt, but I think you still got double quotes in your data.
Yeah, there's still a couple. Yeah, there's some, and that's where I'm saying, that's where I'm getting ready, was talking about. If you have data, original data that may not be, that has things like commas in it, where in this first row, for example, you've got inside the double quotes, you've got seventh heaven, comma, street angels and sunrise.
Oh, I see that.
Down here, somewhere else, there was another one.
Line 20.
20.
No, read it wrong.
There was at least one more. And that's where your data could be a problem in some cases. And that's why intentionally that first line has that extra comma. And if we're doing this manually like this and trying to do all that processing, we ended up the problem because the actual last item, you got this tick mark, then you've got all this with a single tick mark, and it is not putting it properly into a column. So this is a whole column, but it's got the double quote here. Actually, I'm sorry, it starts here, but it's got these quotes that are still part of it. And that's where we got into some problems, that it did not work it correctly because of the way that the data was. The data is not truly a proper, or splitting it just on the comma, split it wrong. That's what I should say. And that threw things off. We've got an extra column here. There you've got to be careful. And then you have to look again at your data, and we would probably need to go through and see what's causing those and make allowances in our programming to get rid of that. But that shows you, though, we can do that manual processing. Well, you still may have to do some things manually, but there is a library that is part of, if I could do this right, there's a library that is part of Python, and it is designed to handle a lot of that processing. And that library is the CSV library. So if you go to the Python documentation on python.org, you can get all the details of using the CSV library on it. And today we're going to just use the CSV reader. There's also a CSV writer that will write files in CSV format. Both of these have some parameters, and one of the things they have is what are called dialects. Think about in languages, you've got dialects. I speak in a Southern dialect. My mother was a Yankee and she spoke in a New England dialect. The dialect includes grammar things as well as accents and other stuff. And by the way, I do not speak with an accent. There are people that listen with one. But there are dialects in CSV. And it actually has a number of those. There's an Excel tab delimited, Unix. So there are several dialects, and if you know this CSV file was created by Excel, you'd use the Excel dialect. If you knew it was a tab delimited created by Excel, you'd use the tabbed one. And that the idea there is to take care of the idiosyncrasies of some of the different programs that created these CSV files. So we're going to use the read or reader method.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is after we open it, we're going to use the reader method. Somehow I got my spacing off. And so we're going, actually after my open, we're going to go in here and we're going to read this. I've still got, I'm going to save myself a little typing. So I'm going to call the variable Oscars. I'm going to say it's equal to csv.reader. But notice I got the little squirrely. That's because I forgot to import it. So I need to import the CSV library. And if I start doing CVS, catch me. And I tell it I want to read that file into a variable called Oscars. It's from the file that I opened, that Oscar age female. And there I have the ability to say, okay, what is the delimiter? What character am I using to separate these fields? And then I can go in and I'm going to just, without doing anything else, for each line in not the file handle, but in Oscars, for each line in it, I'm going to print that line so you can see what it does. And well, that looks a lot like what we did before. That looks a lot like what we did before.
Yes.
So it went in and it broke it down similar to what we did before. But we can also add some additional information. There's some other properties we can do. And where's my tab? I can tell it what character I'm using for quotes in it. And use that to help it break it down. So if I do the quote character equal, and this one originally used double quotes, I'm telling it that the original CVS file used double quotes in order to tell you where the field was. And the hope is that those combinations are going to fix it. Now, in this case, it didn't. In this case, it still separated the two. I'm not sure why. It theoretically should have said, okay, that double quote pair said, okay, any commas in there should not be part of or separated into separate fields. And even that one works out. Where the quote character really works out well is when you've got really strange separators. I would need to somehow process this to fix that. But the the CSV reader reads in that file and it understands it's a CSV file, so it got rid of those new line characters. It did not get rid of the tab characters at the end, the ones that had tab characters, but it did get rid of the new line characters. So I can still do my other processing on it. One of the things I might end up doing here, if I know, okay, the only place there's going to be that bad split is when there's multiple movies, I could use an if statement and count or find out the length of each line. And if the line was more than 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, if the length was more than 5 columns or 5 items, then I would know I need to fix that last item. Those again are the things that you would have to do. But the CSV reader makes it very easy to read and helps you with the processing of CSV files. So that's the CSV reader. Now, sometimes you want to write files. And so let's go and let's just create a file called movies.
I like a good old movie.
Mm-hmm.
You see Atlantis, The Lost Empire?
I may have.
The one with that guy Milo comes down looking for Atlantis. And
I've seen enough movies that I can't remember all of them I've seen. So I'm going to open it for writing, but instead of the CSV reader, we're going to use the CSV writer. And so we take our file and we tell it, and I'm going to use this and just modify it just so I get my typing correct. So it's going to be my file handle. And let me make my file name movies.txt.
Good old movies.
Or actually CSV, because we're doing a CSV one. So I tell it we're going to write to this one. So I open my file for writing. I use the CSV writer to tell it, okay, I'm there. I'm going to, in this case, it says delimit it by spaces. I want to change that and delimit it by commas. And my quote character, I want a double quote. Okay. So now, let's just write one line. So let's not do a loop. I could do a loop that would ask for multiple movies, but I can do, say, movie one is equal to input and let's actually, rather than do a loop, let's just do this a couple of times, but we'll have some stuff in between it. So we're going to ask the user to input a movie.
Can I select the movie?
And when we get there, maybe. I might let you.
Okay.
And then we're going to write a row. So we're going to say movie dot write row. Almost think it's Scooby-Doo.
Wait, Scooby-Doo!
Except I can't spell. Right row, you know, right row.
I don't get it.
And then tell it what it is I want to write. And in this case, I'm just going to write movie one. So it's just going to have a single field. And I will do the same thing here when I enter the second one. Then we'll modify it and do more. Excuse me. And when I run it, hopefully it'll work. Getting one of those delays due to the recording, I think. There we go. So enter a movie. Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you go ahead, Derek.
The Lost City of Atlantis.
And for the second one, we'll do 2001. And that I misspelled Odyssey, but we won't worry about it. Now, nothing seems to have happened, but it says process finished.
Nothing came in on nothing came in on my end.
If I scroll up here, now, well, that's not what we were looking for. It put what I typed in, but lo and behold, it separated every single character. Well, I said the delimiter that it was going to do was a comma here. Well, that doesn't seem right. It put a comma delimiter. Well, my quote character, is that the problem? I don't know. Let's see if a space does it. And I'll just put some stuff in here now. Well, it's still separating every single space. Mm-hmm. That didn't change it. Well, here's the situation. We're not actually giving it a list. We gave it a single string. And so if you give it a single string like this, then you get, or it thought every character of the string was a different element. So what we actually have to supply it is a list. So if I make this movie.0, for element 0 in a list movie each time. Let's see what happens. Object not scriptable. Oh, I've got to fix it. Oh, I put those in the wrong place. Never mind. My index should have been here when I entered it. It's the movie 1 that should be indexed. Yep. Too many names that are too similar. Now, no, these aren't movie. Oh, I need the index here. Yeah. And the other thing I've got to do is I've got to create that list. I was trying to populate it too without creating it. So now that's still index out of range. I've got a couple of choices here. I could give it a blank value, or I could do the append. We'll just give it a blank value. Get my indexes right on the original one. Now, if I go and look at that file, okay, here is when we did it before, when it was wrong. Wait, it didn't write it, did it? Oh, let's see. Ignore.
Last 2 lines.
It's still splitting it. All right, it shouldn't be splitting it. Let me make this right so I'll get rid of those. Okay. We're supplying it a list. Well, maybe it's I need to supply it the entire list. I was supplying it just the one element of the list. And the second one I didn't get anything for, but yeah, there we go. Now I can, I know. So when I set of position 0 here, I was supplying it just a string. Now I'm doing the whole list. And so maybe if I did also movie 1, because we've got it without of index position 1. And so the easy way is just go ahead and make a second index equals input enter the star, copy that for the second one. So now if I run it, movie 2001, I don't remember the star. A movie, John Smith. Now you can see that it put those in as a comma delimited instead of a list.
Mine didn't work.
Well, I'm not sure what you've got wrong. So, but it put those in. Now, it does have the extra blank line in, so we would need to tell it not to put the extra blank line in at the end, and we could do that with the end equal. But here, and this would normally be in a loop if we had more than one movie and star to put in. So you do say a for loop or a while loop until you had finished it, and we've done while loops. But if you want to create a CSV file, you do the CSV writer, you give it the parameters you need. Here, we might want to give it a dialect. If I knew I was going to take the output and bring it into Excel, and I didn't want any problems with Excel, then I could give it a dialect of Excel or one of the others, and you still put that in your CSV writer line. And
wait, I didn't see that part. I didn't see that right there. Here.
Yeah. So I can come in here and again run it, and since I'm appending. Or I'm sorry, not appending, I'm writing, that will wipe out the earlier data. Here again, you can see that it creates those. Now, what I would probably need to do is then strip off the white space of this one before I put it in, but it writes a row each time. This is the most common way that you write to a CSV file. It's the most common way that you write to a CSV file. Go through, or other than being in a loop if you're doing multiple things. We could go back, and I'm not going to do it, we could go back to where we were reading this Oscars file, and maybe I just want the actress in the movie. So I could take that one, brought it in as a list, and then rewrite and just output the couple of fields that I want. Maybe I just want the year and the age. So I could read one file and write another. That's comma separated values files. I read them much more often than I write them. And the reason is that usually what I'm doing is I'm pulling data from some data source that's providing it in that form. For example, I can go into D2L and I can export your name, your username, well, first and last name separate, your username. I can export all your grades, and I can create a CSV file. I could then bring that into a Python program and calculate averages and things in it. The National Weather Service has data that you can download as CSVs. And believe me, those files, some of those files are huge. There are weather stations. You can download individual data from a single weather station. And I said actually National Weather Service. It's actually NOAA that maintains it. But if you think of a weather station that's been collecting data since, say, 1938, and there's some that are older than that, and even if it's only collecting data twice a day, that's a whole lot of data to collect, isn't it? So you can pull in huge amounts of data and process it this way. All right, questions about CSV files?
No, sir.
The next thing we're going to look at is processing JSON files. And JSON has become a standard. It's become a way that a lot of sources of data will either store their data. If you've heard of NoSQL databases, they typically store their data in JSON format. But even a lot of SQL databases can export the data in a JSON format. There's a lot of sources, and I can't remember, but I'm thinking that NOAA gives you a CSV or a JSON format, and several others. You can download data and go through it. The CDC has all of this COVID-19 data. If you've looked at some of these websites that summarize it, they're pulling it from one of the sources, very often the CDC. They're getting it as a JSON file. The JSON file looks like a dictionary of lists. So the JSON file starts with a name. This would be a key in a dictionary. Then it's got square brackets, which look like a list in Python. And then inside of that list, you can have, in this case, multiple dictionaries. So in this particular case, what would be each item in the dictionary, the book, each item in the book is in itself a dictionary. With JSON, we could have inside those dictionaries a dictionary or a list. And so because those can be embedded in each other, nested inside of each other, dealing with them is harder programmatically. So what they've done is they have supplied, or there is a library that will let us process JSON data and also create our own JSON data if we want. And we're going to use that one Monday, and we're going to look at how we can how we can do JSON data.
Mr. Perry?
Yes.
I'm going to try to do some extra credit work and do some more. I'm not going to do some more studying. Let's try to get my grades up.
Okay. The last thing that we cover that will be on the final will be reading and writing files. What we're going to do after I finish file handling next week is we're going to look at quickly a couple of other things. We're going to look at some error handling, and we're going to look at an just basic introduction to classes. So you'll know when you hear classes in something what they are. I will not test you on either of those. However, on the final, there may be bonuses if you include the try and accept the error handling on some of the bonuses. I may say, okay, here's the problem, but if you add the error handling, I'll give you some bonus points on it. That doesn't mean that you should ignore those last couple of topics.
I won't. I
have posted the last required labs through 33. There will be probably 4 or 5 additional labs posted. Those will be bonus. If you do them, it's bonus points. If you don't do them, it's nothing taken off. And And even if you make, say, a 30 on one of those bonuses, what I'd just do is add it to your total points that you've gotten for all of your labs. So those last, through 33 are part of the labs that are graded. The ones that I will post beyond that, those will be bonus. The final exam will be that first week in May. It will be online. I'm going to do it the way I ended up having to do the night class because they were supposed to do the final after spring break. And what we did with it was the section on the programming, they had to do, of course, the 2 programs like you guys did. I gave them a section and said, pick one of the 3 here and one of the 3, and you submit it as in the quizzes. So it will be under a quiz instead of a separate lab assignment, because there's no way that I have found that I can, once you open a Dropbox to time that says you open the Dropbox at 1 o'clock, you've got till 3 o'clock. What I'm going to send out an email and ask everybody, or I may do it as a survey. Do you want a question and answer part, or you just want programming part? You will have to do programming, and I'll probably send that out, do that as a survey to figure it out. I can do it either way. Programs are comprehensive in that you've got to know how to do a print. You've got to know print formatting. You have to use a for loop. I might not say using a for loop, do this, but you would have to use it. You will have at least one of those programs that you'll have to do a while loop, and you will have to do if statements, because those are things that we covered since. And you probably will have to do one that we do reading of a file. I'm not going to make you write one, probably reading a file. Maybe I'll give you something similar to this one that we looked at today, and have you pull it out and bring it in as a CSV file and do a little bit of manipulation and then output it. So, any questions there?
No, sir. But I will try to get my grades up as best I can.
Okay, Derek. What about anybody else? What's his outlandish idea to Martha Washington? He proposes to... Okay, if nobody else has got one, I'm going to stop recording. Again, send me an email if you need, and if anybody needs to do a private Zoom session at any point.
I probably will.